Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast. We cover everything Major League, from spring training to the World Series. We've got your favorite club covered, from New York to Boston to LA. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Ridenauer, and it'll be another awesome episode today. Hope you all have been hanging in there and staying healthy. I'm looking forward to some nicer weather for sure, because we've been getting absolutely pummeled with snow here in Pittsburgh recently, and it's been annoying having to constantly clear my car off of snow and whatnot. But good thing I have a car scraper, because if not, this would be probably an even bigger struggle this winter. But anyways, let's get into the show today. We've got some great segments to get into, a lot of news to touch on, some free agency moves that I'm a little skeptical of, and all sorts of other things that I want to, dive into. But I want to first get into the latest news, obviously, going around the league, and get into any of the typical news-filled, opening segments that I usually do, and then everything else that's going around the MLB. But then after the news, I want to discuss which free agency moves and just off-season moves in general that I am very skeptical of and think that will most likely not work out this year for whatever reason. But then later on, I'll get into another divisional prediction, and this time I'll give a prediction of the NL Central and share which teams I see finishing where in the division. And then be sure, as always, to stick around for the final few minutes of the show, as I'll get into discussing which re-signed free agent will make the biggest impact this season on their new team that their returning team that they're coming back to. So a really, really big episode today. We've got a lot of different things going on. But first and foremost, I want to get into this because we've got some very exciting news for, I think, the first time this offseason, minus all these wild moves being made. And that's the MLB has officially announced the game times for its schedule in this 2021 regular season, and we could have baseball sooner than we think, in all honesty. Opening day is set for April 1st, so April Fool's Day. Hopefully it's not a joke, but I don't think it will be. And it's actually the fourth straight season that all 30 teams have been scheduled at least to play on April 1st, and it is the first time since 1968 that every team in the MLB will play their first game of the season on the same day altogether. So a very, very unique start to probably one of the most, if not the most unique seasons that we're going to have, in my personal opinion, at least. I mean, the most unique season that I've ever seen in my lifetime. But we've got actually a quadruple header on ESPN on April 1st. It's going to kick off with Blue Jays and Yankees at 1:05, Dodgers and Rockies at 4:10, Mets and Nationals at 7:09, and then White Sox and Angels at 10:05. So some really good matchups. I mean, we'll get to see a lot of new players on some new teams, like George Springer on the Blue Jays. We'll see Bauer on the Dodgers. I don't know if he's going to start or not, but at least we'll see this kind of quote-unquote new-look Dodgers team. We'll definitely see these new-look Mets and Nationals teams, and then some White Sox and Angels players that are going to be new on their respective teams as well that we'll get to see. So a really exciting first day of baseball. I mean, I'm going to be glued to the TV all day, taking lots of notes and just digesting everything so I can come back on the show and discuss. But Fox is going to then cover all the games on April 3rd, so that'll be a Saturday, as they'll have Phillies and Braves and Dodgers and Rockies on there. So that'll be, again, another, kind of 2 and 3 days. You're going to have a lot of baseball going on, national TV. And then the final day of the season is actually scheduled for October 3rd, and the All-Star Game will be on July 13th. The fourth Little League Classic will be on August 22nd, as that'll feature the Angels and the Indians. And then the Field of Dreams game, that's been a kind of a big talk this offseason with getting the set ready and kind of, preparing it. It's going to be in Dyersville, Iowa. It's going to take place on August 12th, and it's going to feature the White Sox and the Yankees. So hopefully, barring any sort of weird cancellations due to COVID, we're going to have some really interesting matchups to check out on TV this year. I'm excited for opening day. I really hope personally that the Dodgers aren't on TV 24/7, but they'll most likely be on TV all the time just because of it's the Dodgers and they've got Trevor Bauer now. So they're going to be, I think, in the spotlight more than, and not to mention they're the reigning World Series champions. So hopefully, and what I would love for these TV broadcasting stations, whatever, to maybe tap into like a mid-market sometimes. get into, teams that aren't really watched as much, because there are fan bases out there. I know that they might be small, but, give some credit to the teams that aren't really getting many attention paid to them, because they deserve it all the more, or all the same, I should say. So, we'll probably see the same teams over and over again, but I'm hoping that we don't. But going into the last show that I did, and kind of briefly touching on it, I discussed kind of an issue that I could see arising with a delayed start. As of right now, the season's not delayed. They came out with the schedule, so we're all good to go with baseball season. But I have, I kind of threw out some ideas and some possibilities as to what could go wrong. And one of the possibilities was, what happens if the season's delayed and they push back the last day of the season even further into the fall, approaching the winter time, and owners don't want to pay past a certain point? What are you going to do then? And so the last day of the season is scheduled to be October 3rd. So usually it's like September 29th, October 1. So they might be giving it an extra 2 days just in case. But is that going to be enough flexibility? And are they going to be flexible on that date? And are the owners going to be flexible? Are they going to fight on wanting to not have to pay players if it goes back, past a certain point? We'll have to see, but ultimately I'm really excited to have a full baseball season. I'm sure there will be games that come along that probably will be canceled. It's kind of the inevitable at this point with the pandemic, but hopefully as the vaccine continues to roll out and we get back into the kind of normalcy, we get into the summertime, things might start easing up a little bit. We'll have to see, though. But all in all, really, really geared up for some baseball, really in less than 2 months if you think about it. But I want to get into some other news, as the Dodgers, again, they're back making moves, but it wasn't really a new addition. It was just giving a little extension and really avoiding any arbitration issues, as they reached a 2-year, $8 million deal with Walker Buehler. Now, let's think about it for a second. Walker Buehler has put up some pretty impressive numbers during his career. I mean, he had 215 Ks, and he was a 14-4 pitcher in 2019, and he was an all-star. So he put up really good numbers, and he was 24 years old, mind you, 24 years old. He's getting $4 million this year. Trevor Bauer is getting $40 million, and Trevor Bauer didn't have a 200-plus K season until about a couple years ago, and he's approaching 30. So, and his ERA has never really been below 4, minus last year and 2016, I believe it was. So this is a lot of money to give to Bauer, not that much to Buehler, and I'm curious what will happen, right? The ins and outs of his contract kind of look a little bit like this. He can make $3 million if he makes 28 starts. He also makes an extra $1.25 million if he wins the Cy Young. So there are a lot of incentives in his contract if he meets certain criteria and if he, meets certain thresholds and he accomplishes certain things. And then, not to mention, he also is earning at least a bare minimum, obviously, of $2 million or $4 million this year. But then he also got a $2 million signing bonus. So he's getting a good bit of money in other additives, if you will, but not really in main salary. They are tied up so much with Bauer for the next few years, and it kind of allows the Dodgers, I think, to maybe keep Buehler around until 2022, give him financial security, and then they kind of figure out once they cross that bridge what they want to do. I think Buehler is on the verge of becoming a top-tier pitcher in this league. I think that he's well on his way, and we might not pay much attention to him. I don't know why, but he's never a name that you hear over and over again. You do hear it sometimes, but I think it's overshadowed by guys like Clayton Kershaw, obviously, and then you also have Cody Bellinger. So there's other players on this Dodgers team that are getting much more attention. I will say the Dodgers ultimately have done a nice job at avoiding any and all arbitration issues. They've got Bellinger back, they've got Seager back, they've re-signed Trinan, they've re-signed Buehler. So they're bringing a lot of guys back, and they're making Bauer as that one big ad. And I think that's, wise for the most part. But again, they need to address that third base corner. What are they going to do with that? And I don't know what. I mean, why don't they go after Justin Turner? If they're not, they should then maybe go out into the free agency pool. I mean, Maikel Franco is still a free agent, and I think that he's probably been one of the more, I don't want to say underappreciated, but paid attention to, kind of undervalued as a third baseman. I mean, the guy can put up big-time numbers, and I think that, he would be a nice replacement, and he's younger than Justin Turner as well, so he would be a nice replacement, but who knows what they're going to do at third base. But back to Buehler, His ERA plus has been 120 or higher the last 3 years. And in 2020, he only made 8 starts, and he had 42 Ks in 36 and 2/3 innings. So he was pretty efficient, did not obviously register many starts. But this is going to be a really, really heavy rotation when you think about it. And they're going to be shored up with this rotation for at least another 2 years. So this could be another, kind of a dynasty that the Dodgers are building right now. And I think it's, well past that point. I mean, if you think about it, they were in the World Series for 3 out of the 4 years, and they finally win it on the 4th try. It's pretty, I think now we're starting to see that progression and that building up of the Dodgers. And, I think they're trying to shore things up, tie up all loose ends for the future so they can at least have some confidence that going into the next few years, they'll have this team still with them. But they're not the only team that have been really making moves recently, because there was a huge 3-team trade made between the Royals, the Red Sox, and the Mets. It involved Andrew Benintendi of the Red Sox going to the Kansas City Royals. A lot of different moving pieces, so I'm going to kind of go step by step in this one. All in all, though, before I get into it, it's kind of a curious move all around. Very, very curious. I think the Red Sox were wise to get rid of Benintendi. I don't see any, real hope for him anymore. I mean, he's been okay, but I hear a lot of things that he did not progress the way that people in the Red Sox organization had anticipated him progressing. Now, the Royals will get Benintendi, and the Royals are going to be sending the number 8 prospect in the MLB pipeline for the Royals, Khalil Lee, to the Mets. And then they are also going to be sending Frenchie Cordero and 2 others to New York. So the Royals are getting rid of a lot of prospects. And Cordero, from what I hear, is a very, very, very good player. And the Red Sox are going to be getting Josh Winkowski and then another player to be named from the Mets. So they're going to be kind of doing this little carousel of passing players around. I think that it was smart that the Red Sox, again, got rid of Benintendi. But I think the Mets might have walked away as the real winners of this. When you think about it, I mean, I read a lot of things about Cordero. He's got a lot of power. He's got a lot of pop in his bat. And, I mean, this could be another secret find for the New York Mets, that kind of that outfield. I mean, they're really good with finding these outfielders that are solid all around, and they have a lot of power with them, too. The Red Sox, in addition to this trade, they sent over $2.8 million to the Royals to help pay some of Benintendi's $6.6 million salary. Small market team, it's good that, a big market team is helping out a small market team like that. But this Royals team has made a lot of moves. I mean, they've been arguably one of the most active teams in all of the league, I think. I mean, they've made moves dating way back to the beginning of the offseason. Now, Benintendi, though, he hasn't been really good recently. I mean, he had an awesome, rookie year, obviously finished second in the Rookie of the Year voting. He had a .271 average. He slugged .424. But really, since then, he hasn't been anything special. Now, getting into the other guys and who these other guys are, Cordero, he could be the next, like I said, the next big outfielder for the Mets. He's only played in 79 games from 2017 to 2019 with the Padres. But he did have a .737 OPS and 10 homers in that stretch of time. And a lot of people were very impressed with his power and the power he generates. So, I mean, think about it. They keep adding guys in this outfield. This Mets team might be onto something that I don't think anybody else on the outside is really paying attention to. Now, he only played in 16 games in 2020 for Kansas City, so he's coming off a little bit of an injury-ridden season. I think that if you kind of give him time to work into it, I don't know if he's going to necessarily crack the starting lineup this year. I mean, there's just way too many outfielders ahead of him for the Mets, but I think that eventually he will be pretty good all in all. Now, Khalil Lee, I think he's also got a lot of potential as well. I think that he could be, somebody that is going to be, again, a very good outfielder down the road. He actually had 53 steals in AA in 2019, so a guy that's going to be advancing as much as he possibly can. And in baseball, if you've got a guy that gets on base and he can move over on his own, that's going to set things up and really kind of kick things into high drive, if you will. And when you can score runs, you get guys in scoring position like that over and over again, and you've got guys that can do that. That's going to set you up really, really nicely. So I think this might be a deal that people might look back at in the future. We always kind of look back at least I personally do, when the Padres got rid of Trey Turner. There's all these kind of different deals where there was 3 or 4 teams involved, and then 2 or 3 of the players emerge as superstars, and then the other 2 are kind of like, and it's usually one team that kind of got a little, gypped, if you will, because they gave up somebody that they should not have. So ultimately, I think that it's going to be a move that pays off for the Mets the most. We'll have to see how Benintendi does in Kansas City. Maybe he'll do better in a small market. Who knows? But I want to wrap the show up, or at least this segment, I should say, with a team I do not talk a ton about, but I have made a pretty, or I'd say have made a pretty decent move recently, and that's the Marlins. They went out and they grabbed Adam Duvall, former outfielder with the Atlanta Braves, on a 1-year, $5 million deal with a mutual option set for 2022. Now, what the Marlins are getting is somebody with a lot of power potential. An all-star in previous years. He batted 33 homers and 103 RBIs in 2016, and then he also had 31 homers and 99 RBIs in 2017. So a couple years ago, but still not that far removed. And then last year, he had a really, 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 really good year. I mean, he had 16 bombs, so he's got a lot of power potential, and he's not a terrible defensive outfielder, but here's the issue. The Marlins are essentially outfield overload. I mean, when you've got Corey Dickerson and then you've got Starling Marte, and then between Lewis Brinson, Magneuris Sierra, Harold Ramirez, Monte Harrison, and Jesus Sanchez, all of those guys, all of those young and up-and-coming prospects, that's a lot of guys to kind of, have to cycle through and figure out who starts where and whatnot. But I think that if they went with Dickerson, Duvall, and Marte, that would be their best bet. Experience, guys that have been all-stars before, that would be a pretty solid outfield for the Marlins, I would say. And then not to mention, at least he can hit, right? Because between Brinson, Sierra, Ramirez, Harrison, and Sanchez, all of them combined have batted 220 in over 1,500 plate appearances. Now, I would say Lewis Brinson is at about 60 to 65% of those 1,500 plate appearances, and he's not the greatest hitter. But still, that's not, and if you look at Dickerson and Marte and Duvall, what they've done in their career, I think it would be foolish to put any of those other guys in the outfield over Duvall. Now, Dickerson is injury-prone, and Starling Marte, his numbers dipped down when he arrived in Miami. So you also have to kind of look at that. I think that Dickerson is going to be key in this because he's been very injury-prone over the years, and he's had a lot of injury issues. So you might see one of these kind of younger up-and-coming outfielders all of a sudden make their MLB debut, very similar to what happened with Sixto Sanchez. Sixto Sanchez went from single A all the way to the MLB immediately. Well, not to mention he was obviously pitching very, very well, but that could be a similar situation. Who knows with what's going to happen with Marte. I've seen lots of things where the Marlins might want to trade him eventually to try and get some of that payroll off of their, salary for this year, or some of that salary off their payroll. I don't know what they'll do with Marte, but Dickerson does worry me because he is injury-prone. When he's healthy, though, he can be a really, really good outfielder. And Marte also. They both put up pretty solid power numbers. And then you've got now Duvall, and I think Duvall is just going to add even more to that. He did bat .237 last year, but in the last 2 years, he's had his career highs in OPS. He had a career high 882 in 2019, and then this past year, it was at 833. So he's staying above 800 of an OPS, 16 homers and 33 RBIs. I mean, that's way better than a lot of the guys on the Marlins, and that, I think, is going to be a huge thing that's going to stand out on their roster is this hitting. And I think it's going to come really from the outfield, and if they can really focus on the outfield hitting and then go from there, go into the infield and kind of see what they need to do next, this Marlins team, I think, in a couple years will be good. They've got, I think, a nice consistency for the most part in their team and in their organization. And not to mention, these outfielders, I think, are going to be the bridging of the gap between the up-and-coming franchise guys and the guys that are there now. I think it's going to be a slow kind of progression out with the old and in with the new. I think that these guys are just used right now as fillers, in a sense, to kind of allow the younger guys to get a little bit more experience, get a little bit better, mature a little bit more, and develop more. And then as they start to, these other, Dickerson, Marte, Duvall, they start to exit out of Miami, these other guys like Brinson and Sierra and Ramirez, they'll be able to step up and be ready to go immediately. So I think that's what the Marlins are trying to do right now. I mean, I don't want to read too much into it, but I think that they're on to something. I don't want to say that they're going to be good this year because I don't see that happening. I just really, because of how good this NL East is and the moves that have been made by these NL East teams are World Series contending moves. They are playoff contending moves. The Marlins have not done that, and it's very clear. So ultimately, I think it's a really, really wise move for the Marlins, but we'll have to see how it pays off for them down the road. I think it'll, do more harm than it'll do more service than it will do harm for them. So again, we'll have to see. I think Duvall will have a good year, though. So that'll do it for us in this first segment, folks, but don't go anywhere, because when I get back from the commercial break, I'm going to discuss which free agency moves and just off-season moves in general that I was really kind of skeptical of and don't think will actually work out this year. Folks, it's been a lot of fun so far, but stay right there because we'll be right back here on the GSMC Baseball Podcast.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA, to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Welcome back to the GSMC Baseball Podcast. Jack Ridenauer with you all, and in our first segment, I dove right into the news-filled segment and shared some of the recent trades and free agency signings that have been going on, and really the MLB announcing that the schedule is out now. So that was a very exciting thing to share as well. But make sure you stay right here for the final few minutes of the show today, as I'll get into discussing the free agency re-signings that I think could be the biggest ones this year and that could have the biggest impact as well, in all honesty. I want to now get into some free agency signings that I am a little weary of, and I'm really not sure how they will go this year, and think that they could do more harm than good for some teams, in all honesty. I think that there's a couple moves that I was a little bit head-scratching of, and so I was, I don't want to... Skeptical is a little bit of an aggressive term in this regard, but there are moves that I have been very skeptical of and kind of head-scratching that I didn't really understand. So I'm going to get into a couple of them, run through them real quick, and share, kind of some insight thoughts as to why I think that they're not going to really pan out, and also, what this team could maybe do in kind of in a different direction to maybe counterbalance these questionable free agency signings. So the first one I want to discuss is Michael Wacha going to the Rays. I was very, very, very skeptical of this right from the beginning. I saw that the Mets were trying to bring back Wacha. They brought back Stroman. And honestly, I felt that was a very wise move for them, getting Stroman and getting rid of Wacha. Why did the Rays go after Wacha beats me? Because they gave up two of their three best pitchers from last year. Now, I know Charlie Morton, I believe he was a free agent, so there's nothing they can really do there. But then with Blake Snell, trading him, getting rid of him, now two-thirds of that starting pitching that was really the main focus, I would say, is now gone. And not to mention you gave Aaron Loop left due to free agency as well. So now he's gone. So one of your main bullpen guys is not there anymore. So they lost. They're a very depleted pitching team. And for them to go out and get Michael Wacha, who, yeah, he was an all-star in 2015, but 4 of the last 5 years, his ERA has been well above 4. And then 2 of those years, it was above 5 as well. So if you think about it, he's not on a great career trend. And they go on and also get Chris Archer. He was another kind of head-scratcher for me. It's like they got rid of Snell, and they got rid of Morton, and they added Archer, and they added Wacha back. And I just feel like it was a big downgrade in both kind of regards. And I don't know why they went after Wacha. I mean, he's getting older as well. His strikeout numbers are up and down. I mean, one year he's over 100, another year he's well below it. And this might be an issue for this Rays team, who came in 6th place last year in Team K's as a whole. And not to mention, his ERA, it's going to be, all over the place. I mean, the Rays had the 3rd best ERA as a team last season, and Wacha's 6.62 ERA is not going to mesh well with a team that is, I would say, they really pride themselves on pitching. In all honesty, the reason why they went so far, I think, was because of their pitching. I've come on this show and said that many times, that it was their pitching that was the difference. It was the reason why they really were able to stay in it with a lot of these really, I would say, powerful offensive teams. And now you're getting rid of 2 of your best pitchers, and you're bringing back 2 subpar pitchers. Chris Archer, I think at one point or another in Tampa Bay, he was good. There was flashes of it. There was glimmers of it. But like I've said before, the guy either gives up a home run or he strikes out the side. There is no in-between. He's not a big, just kind of efficient pitcher that's going to get in and out of innings with ground balls and flyouts. No, not the case. And that's what's kind of frightening, is that this team, I think, is going to really rely on strikeouts. And yeah, Archer's got a high strikeout potential, but Wacha not so much, and Archer's been injured the last couple years. So I'm not a big fan of Wacha going to the Rays. I really think that if they were smart now, What they did do that I wanted them to do was go out and re-sign a lot of their players, and they did just that. I think that they could maybe go and get another hitter. They need another hitter somewhere in that lineup to try and bring some sort of power, some sort of pop, because there's no real, I would say, now a lot of the guys I think have potential to be kind of power-hitting players, but they didn't really show that last year. So we'll have to see, like Brandon Lau, I think that maybe he could be one, maybe Kevin Kiermaier, G-Man Choi, sure, obviously Randy Arozarena, but after that, and who knows how consistent those guys are going to be. So I'm not a big fan of Waka going to the Rays, but the next one, another AL East team, Jameson Taillon going to the Yankees. Simple. It's just I'm not a fan of it because we haven't really seen much of Taillon over the last 2 years. He's injured for most of the 2019 season. He didn't play at all in 2020. And if you ask me, I think that's a pretty big risk. I mean, you don't know what you're getting yourself into because you don't know if he's going to be injured or if he's going to be, able to play, if he is actually productive and is actually going to perform. Taillon has a great reputation with him, though. That is the thing. He comes from Pittsburgh. There was a lot of high praise within the organization about Taillon. A lot of the people in the city loved Taillon. They always thought he was going to be really good. But he was out for so long, and he was injured for so long, you didn't really get to see, I think, a full sample size of him. And then Yankees, they were right to go in the direction of pitching. Sure, I will give them that. They were wise to go in that kind of, area. But I don't know if it was the pitching that they needed. I don't know if it was the pitching personnel that they personally should have gone after. I think that there was a lot of other guys they could have gone after, and I think that in all honesty, it was smart of them to get LeMahieu, but I think they spent a lot of time on trying to get LeMahieu back and not really spending any time on the pitching. And I just don't know if Taillon is going to be a guy that does, wonders. Now, he could have kind of this similar former Pittsburgh Pirate effect where you leave the Pirates and you become an incredible baseball player, like we've seen Austin Meadows do and Tyler Glasnow and Garrett Cole. He might have that effect. Who knows? Because a lot of people within, the Pirates organization, or at least rumblings going around the city, is that the pitching coaches, they don't really let the pitchers kind of do their thing. They kind of pitch to contact and not pitch for power. And that's, again, not really what baseball's doing right now. That's not the trend, if you will. So I think that all in all, he's got potential. Yeah, he has solid 2018 at 170 Ks then, 3.2 ERA and 191 innings. They were all career highs, but then again, after that, he got injured, and you didn't really see much of him after that. So I think that the Taillon is obviously a better move than getting Waka for the Rays, but I think that Taillon, still, I don't have a lot of faith in him in my personal opinion. So that's one move. But another move by the Yankees, and again, another pitcher coming to New York, Corey Kluber. Same situation as Taillon when you think about it. This is a pitcher that's made maybe 8 to 9 starts over the last 2 years, and that's a lot of time to be away from baseball. He really wasn't active in 2019. He's experienced numerous shoulder issues. He only started one game last year, and I think that is the problem. He's getting up in age, so who knows what the recovery might be, after that, the injuries that he's had and the shoulder problems he's had. He might not be the same pitcher that he was between 2014 and 2018, where he wins, 18 or more games in 4 of the 5 years. He's a 3-time All-Star. He's a 2-time Cy Young winner. Yeah, he was really good then. He put up year after year of 220-plus Ks each and every single season for about 4-year stretch. But now he's getting into his mid-30s. He's 35, 36. He's got shoulder issues. He's, it's an obvious thing. Guys that get up in age, they don't recover as well. It's just kind of a known fact. And so I don't know if Kluber is going to come back like he was in that 2016, 2017 time frame. I think he could maybe possibly, be all right. I don't know if he's going to be dominant. Now, who knows? I could be way off, right? I could be way, way, way wrong on this because the guy has shown that he can be one of the top pitchers in baseball. Obviously, he showed it with being a Cy Young Award winner, but I just don't know if... It's really hard to tell with Kluber. Kluber's kind of a more challenging situation, I think, than Taillon. Because Taillon, you can know at least, all right, he's been good. He's had, glimpses of being all right, but it hasn't really bubbled all the way to the surface. Corey Kluber has exploded onto the scene, or he really did, between that 2014, 2018 kind of range. Probably one of the better 4 or 5 year runs that a pitcher can have. I just don't know if he can get back to that point. I don't know if he can get back to that boiling point. I think that he's still simmering, and I don't think that he's going to get any higher than that. And I think that they might get, a solid year out of him. He might strike out 180 guys, but he's not going to be churning out 250 Ks. I don't think he's going to have a 3.2 ERA. He might have maybe a 3.8, maybe around a 4. he will be efficient. I think he'll be better than Taillon, but I don't think either one of them are going to be, blowing the doors off of the competition. I think that they're going to be what the Yankees need, but I don't think it's ultimately going to be what they need to get to that next level, getting to the World Series. I don't know if these guys are going to do exactly that. I think it's going to be some other personnel that they're going to need, but I think, again, they spent a lot of time on trying to get Mayhew back that it might have overcompensated them getting solid pitchers. We'll have to see, though. Kluber does have a lot of potential. He's shown it before, like I mentioned. They signed him after a workout, so they must have seen something, or they just saw him on a really good day, and they don't really know what they're getting into. It's a one-year deal, so if it doesn't work, so be it. Then they move on. They still got LeMahieu for another 6 years. So that's a couple moves there, but I want to get into now Mike Foltenevich going to the Rangers. This is another guy that I think that, he's got way more to prove for this Rangers team. I think he's got a lot to prove, and I just don't know if the Rangers need a guy that is in this state in his career. I mean, he had a really good year in 2018. He had a career-best 2.8 ERA. He was an All-Star then. But every other season that he's been in the majors, his ERA's been well above 4. And this past year, it was at 16 after one start that he absolutely just imploded in. And that lone year that he had a really good season, he was an All-Star, he had over 200 Ks. But that level of play I don't think is really in him anymore. I mean, it was kind of sad. He wound up spending a good bit of the summer in the training facility down in Florida for the Braves. He literally, after that one game where he gave up 6 runs in 3 1/3 innings, he was sent right back down to Florida, and he did not make another return. So a guy that really, again, very similar to Kluber, very similar to Taillon, didn't really get a whole lot of experience this past year. Foltenevich, I believe he was injured some in 2019. Kind of going back to 2018, you're kind of getting further and further back, is he's still that same pitcher. The Rangers lost Lance Lynn, so I see why they want to go out and get some pitching. But he was the only pitcher on that rotation that was anything special. I mean, he was the only one that had at least double-digit starts, that's Lance Lynn at that, and to have under a 5 ERA. They had the 23rd ranked ERA in the MLB. Every other major starter they had between a 5 and 7 ERA. So adding a guy that had a 16 ERA in one start, I know it's just one start, but and then got sent right back down to the training facility. So that tells you a lot. Now, I did hear some rumblings that Foltenevich, I guess, was very frustrated with the Braves and the organization. So maybe there was some underlying things going on internally. Who knows? But ultimately, I just don't think that Foltenevich going to the Rangers is a wise move. I don't think it's going to really do anything for them. They've made other good moves, though. I will give them that. I think it was smart for them to go out and get guys like Chris Davis, get guys like David Dahl. That was very wise. But I just don't know if it's going to really pay off the way that they think it will. And they really needed to bring back, I think, an upgrade to this rotation. And I don't think Foltenevich is that. I mean, you look at that pitching rotation, and it was dismal. It was dismal. And bringing in somebody like Foltenevich, it's just not what you needed to bring in. So I'm not a big fan of that. Another move that I'm not a huge fan of, Sean Doolittle going to the Reds. I see why they did it because, again, Raisel Iglesias isn't there anymore. But I just think that there's been a little bit of a digression and kind of a stepping back in his career. I mean, his numbers in the last 2 years, his numbers have gone astronomically just way out of, in the left field, if you will. He's been above a 4 ERA in each of the last 2 years. Didn't register one single save this year, I don't believe. Now, he has been an All-Star before. He does bring a winning experience to the table. So maybe he could bring that kind of, again, veteran leadership and bring that into the bullpen, bring that into the dugout, because this Reds team does have a lot of talent. They, again, earlier on in the offseason, there was a lot of trade rumors floating around with them. What are they going to do with Eugenio Suarez? What are they going to do with Sonny Gray? What are they going to do with Luis Castillo? We still have about a month or so left until the season, starts, so there could still be a lot of moves made, but they haven't done that yet. And so I think that because of that, them losing Bauer, maybe they want to just keep their cards close to their chest, keep everybody that they've got for the most part, and then, maybe Doolittle does bring some veteran leadership. But I just don't think that he's a guy that is going to, again, blow the doors off of you and impress you wildly. I think that they needed to maybe go out and get another closer, somebody else that's going to be a little bit more efficient. I know they probably, couldn't have gotten somebody like Brad Hand. That probably would have been a little bit out of their price range. But, I think that Doolittle, out of all these guys, he's not as bad as some of the, Walker going to the Rays, I thought that was just flat out ridiculous in my opinion. Taillon going to the Yankees, not a huge fan of it. Foltenevich to the Rangers, not a fan of it at all. Doolittle to the Reds, though, I can maybe see it. Again, a lot of these moves were made because I think some of these teams, they needed to fill these voids, right? The Rangers needed to replace Lance Lynn in some capacity. The Yankees needed to bolster their pitching in some capacity, losing James Paxton to free agency, losing J.A. Happ to free agency. And then not to mention, like, the Reds, you lose Raisel Iglesias, so you have to fill that void. You've got to go out and get somebody that has at least proven themselves before. And Doolittle has pitched in high-pressure situations. This Reds team does have guys that have won World Series before. They've gone far into the playoffs. So they've got a kind of an experienced team with them, more than they probably would have guessed initially. And I think that it would have been a very wise move for them to get somebody else, but I don't think Doolittle is the worst. But I'm not a fan of it still. I'm just flat out not a big fan of it. But the last moves that came from the same team, and I kind of want to get into this because to the life of me, I don't know why they did this. I mean, I get it. I do get it. I really, really do. But at the same time, it's like, you've already dug yourself into a hole financially now. Why are you continuing to do that? Yadier Molina and Adam Wainwright, they're both returning. I believe Molina's on a 1-year, $8 million deal, and Wainwright's on a 1-year, $9 million deal, or it's flip-flopped. Either way, they're spending about $17 million this year in combined money for a guy that's 38 who, I mean, yeah, he had a good year last year. I'll give Wainwright that. But Molina, he's on the tail end of it, very tail end of his career. And I think this will be kind of a last hurrah, right? I mean, these two guys were kind of the last survivors of that World Series team in 2011. And so I feel like, again, this is kind of their final send-off before they retire. Molina's still been productive. Maybe you can get another extra year or two out of him. He batted above 260 last year. But they simply just need to move on from him. And I think that, they've paid Arenado so much money. And that's the biggest thing, is that they were trying initially in this free agency spending, they were not going to go out and spend much. They were trying to stay well below a budget, and now they have completely exceeded that, going out and getting Arenado. I don't know if, when you go out and get Arenado, that's a World Series type move. And for the Cardinals, who were trying to save a couple bucks, I really don't know why you go out and you make a major splash like that, and then that's it. And there's nobody really else on your team besides Goldschmidt that I think would scare me as an opposing team. So you made a World Series contending move, and you're clearly not a World Series contending team. I know it's the Cardinals, and I know that they find a way to win somehow, some way. But is it Wainwright and Molina? Are they the answer to do that? No. You could have used that $17 million to go out and get somebody else possibly. Who knows? I mean, I know that, Turner's already, and he's a free agent. They've already figured out their third base position with Arenado. But, I mean, you look at like a guy like Colton Wong, 2 years, $18 million with the Brewers. They could have clearly kept Wong around and paid him that much money on a similar contract and then still had Arenado. And you clearly need to move on from Matt Carpenter. They've had no problem doing that. And I see why they might want to stick around with Wainwright, because he did pitch pretty well last year at the age of 38. But I just think that this is, again, kind of a final hurrah, like a last year send-off before the two stars walk into the sunset together as, retired Cardinals, whatever. That, kind of the typical send-off, if you will. I just think that they weren't wise in how they went about spending their money and who they went out getting. I think that they went all in with Arenado, and I just don't know if that one lone move is going to be what they need to ultimately make it to the World Series. They'll definitely probably contend for the playoffs because they're in one of the worst divisions this year, I think, and I'm going to get into a prediction of it this year, or in this next segment here in a moment. But I think that it's going to be more of a playoff caliber team and not a World Series team, because Arenado, yeah, it'll help them be a division contender. But after that, nope, they're not going to be a World Series team. So we'll have to see how it all plays out. But these are just a couple moves that I wasn't a real big fan of. Obviously, I've talked a lot about the moves that I'm a big fan of, but these moves, not so much. But that'll close things out here for us in our second segment on the GSMC Baseball Podcast. As always, thank you so much for tuning in. But coming up after the commercial, I want to get into yet again another division prediction, and this time give a little prediction of the NL Central and who I could see finishing atop the leaderboard in the division. Folks, it's been a blast so far, but we got a lot more to go, so don't change that channel, because we'll be right back here on the GSMC Baseball Podcast.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be, visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the GSMC Baseball Podcast. Great to have you all here still with me today. Jack Ridenauer again. And in the previous segment, I jumped into sharing which free agency moves I think are not the best moves teams could have made, and also think that some could actually be more detrimental than helpful. I want to now get into another division prediction, and this time dive into the NL Central and get into the picking of which teams could be finishing where amid the division this season. Now, as we all know, this will probably be one of the worst divisions this year. A lot of guys wound up leaving in the division, a lot of different players, and this was also a division that did not make any major free agency moves, minus the Cardinals getting Arenado. Other than that, and the Brewers, I guess, getting Colton Wong. But other than that, nothing real special happened. I mean, the Cubs got rid of a lot, the Pirates got rid of a lot, and the Reds didn't really make any major adds, and they also lost Trevor Bauer. So it was more loss than gain in this division, and I think that is, one telltale sign that is going to be, really, I think, showing itself this year when this division starts to play and they have to go up against each other. It's going to be a competitive division amongst average teams. So however competitive you want that to sound like, that's going to kind of be the gist of this division, I would say. So getting into it, I'm going to start with number 5 and work all the way up to number 1. Coming in at number 5, I think we can all guess who it'll be, the Pittsburgh Pirates. And I hate to say that because, again, I do live in this city. I've lived in this city for quite some time. Some of my best friends are from here. My girlfriend's from here. I went to school here. So a lot of great things that have happened for me in Pittsburgh. But the Pittsburgh Pirates are not really, I think, a big highlight for this city at all. I mean, they're clearly in a major reboot, I think, phase right now. They don't have Trevor Williams anymore. They cut him, and now he's with the Cubs. Joe Musgrove, he's with the Padres. Josh Bell's been traded to the Nationals. Jameson Taillon is with the Yankees. They were all key pieces for them in previous years. I know I was semi-critical of Taillon in the previous segment, but he was a big fixture in that pitching rotation at one point or another before he got injured. They were, a lot of people were very high up on him, but again, those injuries kind of derailed that potential and kind of really didn't allow him to display what he was capable of doing, at least what people thought he was capable of doing. We have yet to really, I think, see the full potential of it. But nonetheless, a lot of guys that are not with the team anymore. They do have a lot of up-and-coming talent, guys like Key Bryant Hayes, who, talking to various people around in the city, a lot of people think that he's going to be one of the best defensive and probably overall third basemen in all of baseball. And he could be the face of the third base position in the future, really, for this team. Brian Reynolds, he showed in 2019 he can be a dominant force. Had a great season. Cole Tucker is another guy that is a young up-and-coming star. So they do have a roster that has future potential, but right now it's incredibly depleted. And this team, honestly, has not been good for years. They finished under 500 for 4 of the last 5 years. They haven't been to the playoffs since 2015, and they really haven't gone anywhere further than the divisional round in over 20 years. Think about it. They really have not been anything special of a team in quite some time. And I think that the best thing for them, though, right now is to just keep unloading, right? I think that this is a big kind of transition period for the Pirates, and I think we're witnessing that right now. They're kind of, again, in a whole entire rebuild phase. They're in a complete reboot mode. They're really trying to start from scratch again. They're trying to start over. And I think that that's going to be a big key for them moving forward, is continuing to do that. Maybe even towards the trade deadline, we could see some other guys start to exit out. They did get a lot of prospects. They probably have some of the most prospects in the trade pool that they got from this offseason than any other team, really. And, they unloaded more stars than, any other team did also. So this is a team that I think maybe down the road will be good, but right now they are nowhere near that. They might be one of the worst teams in baseball. People have already joked, hey, I'll be a fan for about 2 weeks, and then after that, I'm probably going to have to find another team to root for because they are not going to be very good. So they're coming in at number 5 for me. I want to get into number 4, the Chicago Cubs. And I know that might sound alarming considering they finished in first place last year, but I think that was almost out of luck. They did have very good records against some other top-tier teams, some other above 500 caliber teams, but their team overall, if you looked at the roster, their first 6 hitters batted below 250. They had a string of hitters that were below 240, 220. Jason Hayward and Ian Happ, they were the only 2 that were above 250 in the entire starting 9. You got guys like Baez and Rizzo hitting career lows. Really slumping. They also traded Darvish. They non-tendered Schwarber. Then all of a sudden you're going to have Rizzo and Baez being free agents sooner rather than later. And I think that honestly, when they were good last year, it might have just been, again, out of luck and just right place, right time. But when they get to the playoffs, they lose to the Marlins. It was clear the hitting was completely exposed. They had no hitting, and that was their issue all year long. And I had a feeling that they were not going to, if they were going to go to the playoffs, they weren't going to go very far because their offense was not good. It was clearly not good. If you got guys, them and the Brewers were 2 teams that I felt that usually have much better hitters, and they completely underperformed last year. And the Cubs had a lot of those guys. And as a result, I think it hindered them towards the end of the season. I think that they were able to come out of the gate strong, and also not to mention, the Reds were very disappointing. The Pirates were flat out bad. The Brewers, they were up and down. They barely got into the playoffs. So very similar to last year, what'll probably be this year, a very, very subpar kind of blah division, if you will, but very competitive because it'll be a lot of teams that are all very average. So I think that the bottom 2 are very clear, the Pirates and the Cubs, and their pitching rotation's completely depleted. They've got some good guys, though, potentially, that could, be good in the long run. But Darvish gone, that's not a good sign. And I think really the beginning of the end was when Theo Epstein decided to leave. The guy that was really responsible for building this team, the guy that was really responsible for putting together the World Series caliber team that they had in 2016 that wound up winning it. And this past season, maybe it was going to be a last, final crack at the World Series or the last final, major try at a playoff run this past year in 2020. But the pandemic might have thrown things off for them, right? And I think that was kind of a big thing. Guys didn't perform, and I think Epstein said, you know what, I've had enough of it. I'm out of here. I'm leaving. And I don't blame him. I think he did a wonderful job there. He's done a wonderful job in Boston. The guy can clearly build teams from nothing into something because the Cubs were terrible before he got to Chicago. So he definitely is able to do that. And wherever he lands, he probably will build another winning franchise. But I don't see the Cubs finishing higher than 4th. If the Cubs are good this year, I would be surprised. Because, yeah, they do have still a lot of good players, but they did lose a lot, and they didn't really gain much. Jock Peterson was the one kind of main ad, I would say, but, he's just a power hitter, right? And he kind of just replaces Kyle Schwarber. They just kind of switched them out, almost, essentially. I don't know if Baez is going to continue to have a bounce-back year. Maybe Rizzo will have a bounce-back year. I don't know, but those guys are going to be free agents sooner rather than later. So this might be, again, a last hurrah before they go into a rebuild phase like the Pirates are going through right now. So I've got them coming in number 4, getting into the top 3 now. Now this top 3, in my personal opinion, can finish in a variety of ways. It can really finish in any way. So I'm going to go with just what I think is going to happen, but I think it could go in a numerous amount of directions. Coming in at number 3, I've got the Reds. I think that the reason why I'm not completely sold on them is that, again, they've lost way more than they've actually gained. This past year was a good year for them, I will give that. This was the first time since 2013 that they finished above 500. But they lost their main arm in Bauer, and they did have one of the top-tier pitching rotations. They were second as a whole in strikeouts. They were one of the top ERA teams as well. But Bauer being gone, that's a huge part of that strikeout. He had about a sixth of their total strikeouts just himself. And in a 60-game season, that's a large chunk of the strikeouts to have for one sole guy. Now, there was also other rumors earlier on in the offseason that Luis Castillo was going to be on the move, Sonny Gray, guys like Eugenio Suarez. They were all suspected to be on their way out. They haven't left yet. They haven't been moved yet, thankfully, because if that were the case, they might be finishing below the Cubs, in all honesty. Mike Moustakas and Nick Castellanos, they're going to be keys for me this year for the Reds. They've got to step up. They've got to step up. They're on that contract, same contracts, 4 years, $64 million or $66 million, one of the two. And they were so... I will give Castellanos this. He came out very strong, but then he really, really fizzled out towards the latter part of the season. Moustakas was just a nightmare in general to deal with, and he was also injured. So I really don't know if the Reds can finish anywhere higher than third. if they get good production out of those guys, and Castillo maybe has a career season, yeah, maybe they'll be pretty good. I mean, they still got, Tucker Barnhart behind the plate. They had a nice emergence of Jesse Winkler this past year, but he was a DH. And in previous years when he's played in the field, again, very similar to Ozuna, did not really have much success in that situation. He was a DH, though, this past season. As a result, he was really good. So I don't know if they're going to be that great. I think they'll be okay. I think that they can be competitive within the division. But out of that, I really don't see that happening. Now, if guys like Suarez comes back to his 2019 self where he's batting over 40 home runs and over 100 RBIs, and like I said, the pitching's lights out, and everybody is doing what they need to do, then yeah, I mean, they've got good guys. They've got potential on their team. It's just a matter of that potential, putting it all together and being a good team. So I've got them coming in at 3, but coming in at number 2, my Milwaukee Brewers. And this is a team I think that's got a lot of potential. I mean, out of all the teams in the division, they've got the potential to be good because what they had last year was a couple pleasant surprises. Corbin Burns was a really nice emergence. I mean, floated around a 2 ERA the entire season. Then you've got a rookie like Devin Williams who comes in, throws a .3 ERA in a little over 25 innings and has over 50 Ks. So basically averaging about 2 Ks every single inning that he appeared in, which is pretty staggering because pretty much he's going in for maybe an inning, maybe 2. And so think about it, 2 strikeouts per inning. He's just flying through innings. So they had a nice emergence of those 2, and I think that was a real nice surprise, but the hitting was terrible. And Keston here, I felt suffered a little bit of a setback. Avisel Garcia was okay. Orlando Arcia, he was all right. Christian Yelich was terrible. They finally got rid of Justin Smoke and Eric Sogard, which I thought was very advisable. They bring in Colton Wong. Now, this is what I'm expecting them to do. I don't know if they'll do it, but we'll have to see. I want them to go out and get a decent third baseman. I would love them to get a guy like I've mentioned him before, Maikel Franco, or a guy like Justin Turner. Somebody that, you could get Turner on a 2-year deal towards the end of his career. He's going to be 36. He's won a World Series. He's been successful. He still has a lot left in him, I think, more than most 36-year-old position player baseball players. So I think that if they go out and get somebody like that, that would be a huge ad. That would be a ginormous get. And in all honesty, you kind of look at that infield, it could be pretty good. It could be a solid infield if they keep around with, obviously Arcia there. I think he's a decent glove. He's an okay bat. But they're going to have to move either him or Hira to make room for Wong. And I think Wong's going to be a nice piece for them. Hopefully Lorenzo Cain can come back. He wound up opting out of the season and walking away during that Cardinals series they had when there was that big outbreak. And I didn't blame him. I said, hey, it's probably a wise move to get out of there before it gets real bad. And so I think that if they can keep guys on the team for the entire year, that's the other thing that worries me. And you saw how Cain opted out last year in the middle of the season. Anything with COVID that happens, that could be a problem. That could, occur again. And if that's the case, they're going to be really scrambling around trying to figure out, well, what are we going to do with hitting? What are we going to do with, our outfield? It's going to start getting, very, very slim as time goes on because Ryan Braun's not there anymore. If Cain, again, opts out or if he's kind of wavering on if he wants to come back next year, that's 2 outfielders gone. And Ben Gamel has yet to be re-signed, so maybe they re-sign him and stick him out there. He didn't have a very good year last year. I thought the year before he was a good piece to have off the bench. I don't know if he's a good starter, but I definitely think that if this Brewers team can have the same kind of nice surprise performances from a couple of these players, they've got the really good pitching that comes back, and if Christian Yelich can come back and have a really good season, I think that this Brewers team can be a lot better than people might think that they're going to be. Now, I know a lot of people are saying that probably the Brewers and Cardinals are going to finish atop the division. It's probably going to be a battle between those 2 teams. And I honestly agree with that. I definitely think that it's going to be, a head-to-head kind of thing all the way down the stretch. Each and every single one of those division matchups, it's going to be critical that either team that wants to find their way on top of the division comes out on top and wins in those, again, 3-game home street or 3-game home stands or 3-game away stands or whatever it might be, those back-to-back 3-game series that they might have to play. Those games are going to be critical. Every single Cardinals-Brewers game is going to add up towards the end of the season. So that's a matchup I'm looking forward to seeing, but I'm going to say the Brewers finish second. They could maybe eke their way into the playoffs on a wild card, but if they want to make some noise, they really got to hope that Yelich has a good year, Cain comes back in full swing, and Wong has a big impact, because if not, Yeah, I mean, it might be another long offseason in Milwaukee. But coming in at number 1, I think we can all guess who it's going to be, the St. Louis Cardinals. I think that the Cardinals were wise to go out and get Arenado because it clearly made separation between them and their other division cohorts. I don't know if that's a World Series move. I said it in the last segment, and I'll say it again. They made a World Series type move getting somebody like Arenado. If a team like the White Sox had gone out and gotten Arenado, I would say, wow, that team's going to be in the World Series. But when I see a team like the Cardinals get Arenado, I kind of question that and say, I don't know if I see them in the World Series or not. I don't really see them as that caliber player. I think that it was an intriguing thought for them to go after Fowler, or trade Fowler and maybe make some room in the outfield because, I mean, let's face it, Harrison Bader and Tyler O'Neill are very average, right? And Jackie Bradley Jr. is still on the market. And personally, I think that it was foolish of them to try and bring back Wainwright, try to bring back Molina. I mean, they should have either just kept one of them, not both of them, because now, most of their payroll is being eaten up by Arenado. And they had gone into the offseason saying, hey, we want to try and save some money, and they clearly did not do that. I mean, they needed to get a $50 million borrow from the Colorado Rockies just to help pay off Arenado's salary this year, or part of it at least. And I think that they could have saved that money and used it on a guy like Jackie Bradley Jr. If you're going to trade Dexter Fowler, and you're going to but you're not going to make any upgrades in the outfield, and you've got two guys there that are, they're young, but they did not hit well the last couple years. Harrison Bader a little bit better than O'Neill, I would say, but both, I would say they're average. And you re-sign Molina and you re-sign Wainwright, both getting older, and you make a move like Aaron. It just doesn't make sense. What they are doing in the offseason doesn't add up, in my opinion. Now, again, I'm no baseball general manager. I am a journalist and a broadcaster. That is what I do. That's my title. I talk about this stuff, and I bring my opinion, and I bring the evidence. And just looking at it from a distance, their moves just don't add up. And I'm going to keep saying it over and over again. You make a World Series contending move with Arenado, but then you re-sign two aging stars, and you trade one of your outfielders when a perfectly capable outfielder in Jackie Bradley Jr. is still on the free agency market. So, to the life of me, I really don't get that thought process. I also think that they could have made maybe a bigger push for Michael Brantley. There were guys that were on the market that they could have gone after, that they could have definitely saved a couple bucks, probably could have added more pieces to their lineup than just getting Arenado. I mean, again, that's a huge blanketed move in terms of, it's a huge blanketed move because it covers, everybody kind of pays attention to that and just that. The Padres, they've got numerous moves like that. You can't really highlight one. You've got Darvish, you've got Snell, you've got Musgrove, you've got so many guys that they've added. The Dodgers getting Bauer, that's kind of their big blanketed move. It's a move that kind of covers the entire team, and that's all you really see them doing in the offseason. All I've really thought about is the Cardinals getting Arenado. But then you look deeper, and you don't just look at the surface, but you look deeper, and you're like, this isn't a great lineup. This is an okay lineup that could have potential, that could maybe be good, but I don't see it. Now, I know I've kind of ripped the Cardinals in half for them being a first-place team. I still think they're going to be good because Arenado does make a big difference. He just doesn't make a World Series difference. I think their pitching is okay. It's not too bad. Jack Flaherty is somebody that I think is going to be good eventually. He's definitely got a little bit of growing to do. Dakota Hudson showed good signs last year as well for the Cardinals. So I think that they're in the right direction. I just don't know if this offseason was the wisest or most sensible offseason that they've had. I still think they'll finish in first because it's the Cardinals. They're a winning ball club, and they just know how to win. They just know how to win. It's a good winning culture, and that's what they do. So we'll have to see. So again, Cardinals coming in 1, Brewers at 2, Reds at 3, Cubs at 4, and the Pittsburgh Pirates finishing in the basement in the NL Central. So we'll have to see how that kind of plays out in this season. But folks, that's going to do it for us in this third segment. Thanks for sticking around as always. Stay right there because we'll be right back after this commercial break for the final segment today, where I'll dive into sharing which re-signed free agents will have the biggest impacts on their team this year. Folks, don't go anywhere because we've got one last segment here on the GSMC Baseball Podcast.
Want to know the latest in soccer? Then listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast. From MLS, the World Cup, and the Premier League, we've got you covered. The latest updates, the hottest matches, and news on the league's top players. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast.
David Beckham scores the goal to take England all the way to the
Listen now.
Hey everyone, and welcome back for the final segment here today on the GSMC Baseball Podcast. Jack Ridenauer with you. And in the previous segment, I got into another division prediction, sharing which teams in the NL Central I think are going to be the best and which are going to have a tight race atop the leaderboard. I want to wrap up the show today getting into some of the re-signed free agents and sharing which ones I think will have the biggest impacts when they come back on their respective teams. There's been a lot of guys actually that have gotten re-signed. I didn't really realize it. And some of them are big-time guys. I mean, they're huge pieces to their team. So I'm going to jump into it right away. And getting into it, the number one guy, at least not the number one guy, but one of the top guys, I would say, that was one of the biggest headlining names in all of free agency. And when he re-signed, arguably one of the biggest re-sign moves in the entire free agency as well, and off-season, JT Royal Muto going back to the Phillies. I mean, what more to say about that, right? JT Royal Muto is coming back. Yeah, he batted .266, which was his lowest batting average since 2015, but he put up 11 homers, 32 RBIs. His OPS was actually at a career high at 840, and then his OPS plus was the second highest he's had in his career after 2017 when he had 126. He had a 123 OPS plus this past year. And again, as a catcher, as somebody that is, I would say, predominantly, I was actually talking about this with a friend of mine the other day, catchers really, I don't think, get any publicity or any notoriety because it's a defensive-focused position. You're really trying, as a catcher, your main focus is preventing runs from advancing, making sure that there's good chemistry with you and your pitcher and that he's hitting all of his spots. Hitting is not really in the forefront, I would say, in the description of what a catcher is. But JT Real Muto brings a defensive side, but he also brings a really good offensive side. You know, a two-time Silver Slugger, two-time All-Star, he's also been a Gold Glover. So he can do a little bit of everything, and I think that's what makes him so good. I mean, not too long ago, I think it was back in 2018, 2017, 2019, he was number one in the MLB in caught stealing as a catcher throughout 43 guys. 43 guys. And not to mention, imagine how fast he has to get out of a crouched position to get up into a stance and throw a guy out at second. And adding him back to this team, it's going to do wonders. I mean, this was a really good hitting Phillies team, even though they did not play that great and really finish out the season well. They batted .257 as a whole, which was tied for 8th in the MLB with the Padres and with the Rockies. And then not to mention, you also look at the RBI factor, right? They were 7th as a team in the RBIs, and he had 32 of those RBIs. So again, although it's, not a huge percentage of it, he's still, I would say, a big piece of this offense, and he really brings a lot to the table, and not to mention he's a great defensive backstop catcher. And so if you can get a guy that can do a little bit of both, he can be effective in both angles, I think you're sitting pretty. So I really like Real Muto going back to the Phillies, so I would say that's up there as one of the best re-sign moves in the entire offseason. Now, the next one I want to get into is DJ LeMahieu. I think this was a big move. I mean, the Yankees had talked about it. Brian Cashman was quoted by saying that he was very, very, very focused on getting DJ LeMahieu back. That was the biggest thing, is they were very focused in getting him. They were really wanting to bring him back. They wanted to address the pitching, and they wanted to address re-signing DJ LeMahieu. LeMahieu had a career season last year, so I can see why they would want to address that, right? Batted .364, which is clearly a career high for him. It was also the second time in his career where he's led the entire MLB in batting average. Last time he did was in 2016, and he's been an all-star in 3 of the last 5 years, 3 in the last 6 years. I mean, he was an all-star in 2015, 2017, and 2019, and his OPS was way above his other OPS numbers in his career. I mean, it was a career high 1.011. So right there, I mean, that's a big jump from an 893 OPS the year before. Not to mention 10 homers and 27 RBIs. That's not that bad of numbers, if you'd ask me. I mean, he finished in the top 3 in MVP. He was a finalist. He was a Silver Slugger. He's been a Gold Glover multiple times. He's won a couple other Silver Sluggers. He was actually in the MVP voting in 2019 as well. So back-to-back top 5 finishes in the MVP. That's pretty impressive, if you ask me. I mean, I would want him back all the more, and very much so if I was Brian Cashman. So it was a wise move on his part. Getting into the numbers for the Yankees, though, and why I think it was so crucial that they went after him, 4th in the MLB in RBIs right there. I mean, 27 RBIs, yeah, he's not really contributing to a whole lot of the RBI numbers, but the year before he put up 102. which was way above, the 4 or 5 previous years that he had where he had 60 or more RBIs. And if you look at it, his numbers have slowly increased over time. You go from 2012, he had 22 RBIs. You go to 2016, 4 years later, he had 66 RBIs. And then 2019, he had 102 RBIs. So those are 3 pretty big improvements and jumps in, not that many of years. So I think that's what's impressive about LeMahieu, is that he's made a lot of ground in not that much time. The one thing is he's getting a little older, right? He's 32. He'll be 33 this year. So he's getting up in age, and that is somewhat of a concern, right? I mean, you have to kind of be concerned about it, especially if the guy's on a contract for the next 6 years. That's something definitely to make note of and kind of pay attention to. As a team, the Yankees, their average wasn't great. I mean, he batted .247, and I think that, his average definitely stood out amongst the rest of the Yankees guys, right? But their OPS numbers, I mean, they were 5th in OPS, and he had probably a ton to do with that. And then not to mention the on-base percentage, they were tied for 3rd in on-base percentage as a team. And he had an AL high 421. It was actually a career high for him in on-base percentage. And he had career high numbers in batting average, on-base percentage, slugging percentage, OPS, and OPS plus by a mile for the OPS plus, by the way, 177. And in 2019, it was 135. In 2018, it was 88. So you go from 88 to 135 to 177. That's not a gradual buildup. That's a skyrocketing each and every single season. So I think LeMahieu coming back to the Yankees was a big move for them. They really needed to do that. I think it was very wise of them. And I just worry that the contract is a little too long and that it will tie him up there for too long, and he might fizzle out, right? He might plateau. He might not turn out to be the player that I think everybody is hoping him to be because of just age, right? I mean, I think that's a simple thing. And especially as a position player playing every single day, that's going to accelerate your, I would say, downfall and kind of the downspin of your career all the more than a pitcher, right? I mean, you're having to play every single day. You're in the field. You're doing offense and defense. Pitcher just has to worry about pitching. That's why you see guys go way later into their 30s and maybe even some into their 40s. Whereas position guys, I don't feel like you're seeing a whole lot of that. Again, maybe around 35, 36, they start kind of petering out a little bit, and I think that's what's going to happen to LeMahieu. So I think the contract was a little long, but it was wise that they went out and got him nonetheless. So getting into the next guy, Marcel Ozuna, how could you not say this was a huge re-sign? Especially when Ozuna could have clearly gone to the AL. He had about 10 teams interested in him, and he was arguably one of the best hitters in baseball last year. Led the NL in home runs, led them in RBIs, batted .338, career high for him. Had a slugging percentage of .636, and then a 1.067 OPS. That's pretty impressive. And again, that's all about a mile high than the rest of his career numbers. I would say his next highest is a 924 OPS in 2017. But he is, he's somebody that they need to have. And I know I've mentioned it before. He balances out their lineup more than people suspect. And when you've got a team that had the second best average in the MLB and he batted .338, and then they had the second most home runs, they were one of 2 teams, them and the Dodgers, to bat over 100 home runs as a team, and he had 18 of those home runs. I mean, he's contributing to about a fifth of their home runs. That's a lot. I mean, imagine if that had been a whole season. Imagine how many they would have had, and imagine how many a fifth of that total would have been in a 162-game season. So him in the lineup does wonders for them, and I think that they're going to be very, very pleasantly, not pleasantly, they're going to be very happy that they were able to bring back Ozuna, because he could have gone to a team like the Astros. He could have gone to a team like the White Sox. I honestly thought he was going to be going to the White Sox, because if they had gotten somebody like Ozuna, there's no question in my mind that they would be a World Series team. No question in my mind. They went out and got pitching. They went out and got hitting. If that would have been the case, they would have gone out and gotten hitting. That would have just completely changed the entire trajectory of their entire team. So that's why I feel that some of these guys coming back to their team, it's going to maybe not necessarily, it might do even better than what it did for that team a year ago, because it's going to be on a bigger scale, larger sample size, 162 games instead of 60 games. So the impact can be greater, and it can be for a longer period of time. But it could also open possibilities of maybe that player just came out really strong last year, and towards that 80-game, 90-game, 100-game mark, they start to get tired. They start to, fatigue sets in. So with this really long offseason for some teams, I'm hoping that there are guys that are going to come out and still have that same similar performance that they had a year ago. but we'll have to see. But I think ultimately Ozuna re-signing with the Braves was probably one of the biggest. I think him and that's a tough one. Between Ozuna, Royal Muto, and Mayhew all re-signing with their respective teams, I would say those are the three biggest re-signs right there. Those were three moves that have had to be made by those teams if they wanted to be competitive. I mean, at least maybe not for the Yankees, but for the Phillies and for the Braves, I think that if they wanted to be really like competitive, like World Series caliber teams, they needed to go out and make those moves, and they did. So I think that it's going to be a very interesting season in the baseball kind of landscape and in the MLB with these guys coming back to their respective teams. Not to mention you've got Ozuna for another 4 years, so that's not too bad of a time period to have him also. So the last three guys I want to touch on, Michael Brantley Jr. Him re-signing with the Astros, I think, was massive. He was about to go to the Blue Jays, if I'm not mistaken, or he was going to go somewhere. And he might have actually maybe was going to go to the Braves. I don't know. There was some speculation that he was going to be on the move. And Springer was already had been reported, being on the move and signing with another team. But Brantley was, again, kind of up in the air. And then it turned out that he was going to re-sign with the Astros for a 2-year deal. And I think that's going to do a lot of great things for this team, because this team saw one of the biggest downfalls hitting-wise, I think, in a year span that any other team has ever seen. They went from, in 2019, being the number one team average-wise and the number one team OPS-wise to being the 20th ranked average in all of baseball. And then you look at the OPS, they were not even in the top 10. They were 16th in team OPS last season. So you go from 1 to 16 and then 1 to 20 in a year. That's a big setback. That's a huge setback. And I think they needed to bring back anybody and everybody that they could from this Astros team that was going to, walk and be a possible free agent. I know Josh Reddick, I believe, he's still on the free agency market, so there could be some holes in that outfield. Maybe they go out and get a guy like Jackie Bradley Jr. Maybe they go out and re-sign, or they go out and pick him up, and that would be a big move for them because they have a hole in the outfield with George Springer not there. But Brantley being there, it's going to do a lot of things for them. I mean, his numbers were all pretty solid across the board. Again, he's been very consistent the last couple years. He's actually batted above 300 the last 3 seasons. He's been above 290 the last 4 seasons. And then his OPS has stayed within 800 to 875. So talk about a guy that you need to have in your lineup, right? He's had 4 straight years of over 100 OPS plus. And then his home run numbers, they're okay. They're kind of up and down. But ultimately, he does so much for that lineup because he's just another bat that teams have to worry about. It's, I have to worry about Jose Altuve, Yordan Alvarez, and then all of a sudden it's like, I've also got a Carlos Correa, and then I also have to worry about, Michael Brantley. And it kind of it builds on itself from that point. Now they don't have George Springer anymore, so that's one less bat that people have to worry about. But still, bringing Brantley back, I think, is an incredible thing for them, especially for a team that saw a huge, huge setback from 2019, just clearly not the same team. And I think a lot of it had to do with a lot of the offseason stuff, with the cheating scandal and everything, people figuring them out. They come into the year, and, they were exploited, I think. I think their weaknesses were shown, and they were started to kind of bubble to the surface, and as a result, it really affected them. So I think Brantley coming back to the Astros is a big move. And the last two I want to touch on, Didi Gregorius to the Phillies and Nelson Cruz back to the Twins. Obviously, everything that I said about Royal Muto applies for Gregorius, the same exact way. 10 homers, 40 RBIs, guy batted above 280 this year. So that's a lot of offense that this Phillies team wanted to bring back. Those were 2 fixtures in the lineup last season that I think were the difference makers in a lot of situations. Bryce Harper came out pretty strong, but Rhys Hoskins, he did not have a very good year. Alec Baum was, again, another difference guy, but I wouldn't say that, Harper he started out really, really strong, and then he kind of just plateaued, and you didn't really do a whole lot else after that. So I think that having Royal Muto and Gregorius brings balance to that lineup like Ozuna brings balance to the Braves lineup. And with Gregorius back, they don't have to worry about going out and getting any other shortstops. Freddie Galvis, he was going to be possibly a target. I know Andrelton Simmons was going to be a possible target, but nothing panned out with that, so they were forced kind of to re-sign Gregorius. But I think it's a wise move that they did do that. I think it was very smart on their part to go out and make that addition and kind of that re-add. But I think that this Phillies team is going to be a lot better this year than people are probably making them out to be. I think they're going to be really good. I don't know if they can compete with, like, the Mets, but I think them and the Nationals are going to be a fun matchup to watch all year long because they're very comparable in my opinion. I think that the Nationals edge them out just ever so slightly with pitching, but I think the hitting's pretty comparable. So Gregorius to the Phillies is a big move, and then obviously Cruz going back to the Twins. If you look at their lineup, right? I mean, they needed him to come back. They had nobody that was anything special hitting-wise. You know, Luis Arias, he was the only one that was above 300 other than Nelson Cruz. He has 16 homers and 33 RBIs at the age of 39. He's going to be 40 this year, and he turned 40 in the middle of the year last year. So this guy, I mean, he's going to be, you know, he's only a one-year deal, so I don't think he's going to really have that big of an impact in the long run and kind of in the long haul. But when you've got a guy that's coming back that belted 16 homers in an abbreviated season, he had a 992 OPS, which is, again, his now, from 2015 on, he's been above 900 in OPS except for 2018. You know, in the last 7 years or so, he's been an all-star 5 different times, and he's had an above 100 OPS plus dating back to 2008, every season since then. So his numbers are astronomical, you know, having consecutive years of batting over 40 home runs and having over 100 RBIs. They needed him back in the lineup. There was no question about it. If they had not gone out and brought him back, it probably would have been a detrimental thing to their lineup because they would have had no power there. So ultimately, all of these re-signs I think are really wise, but I think that some were better than others. But I think that the re-signs, again, they were needed. You had to make them if you were these teams, because if not, you would have set yourself further behind than I think you would have, especially with last year. But not having some of these guys back on these teams, it might have really, I would say, sent things kind of sideways for a couple teams. But again, we won't have to worry about that because they've all been re-signed. But folks, I think that's going to do it for us here today. As always, thank you for listening to the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I would like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice review. That really helps us. Also, if you can please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, we would really appreciate that as well. And as always, everyone, thanks so much for tuning in. And until next time, have a wonderful day.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.